Every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Some stories begin with questions, some begin with loss. All of them are rooted in love and the search for connection. This is Janet Monroe, and this is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, a podcast where real stories take root and grow. Because the more we share, the more we understand, and understanding helps us grow. Now, here's Janet Monroe.
Hello, and welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories. My name is Janet, and I am your host. The roots represent the beginnings, the birth parents, the adoptee, and the adoptive parents. The branches are the far-reaching effects of adoption, the siblings, family members, and friends whose lives are changed forever. Today, I'm joined by Michael, who has graciously chosen to share his journey with us. Michael's story begins in Tennessee, where he and his brother endured deep trauma as children, but also found love, safety, and belonging in a blended family. Now, through faith and forgiveness, he has found closure and a powerful voice to encourage others. Michael, thank you for being here, and let's start with your story in your own words.
Yeah, thank you, for sure. So I noticed you said Tennessee, but I'm originally from Flint. That's where everything transpired at. Was in Flint.
Oh, my mistake. I apologize for that. So take us back to your earliest memories of life with your birth mom.
Yeah. So in doing so, so I really don't remember too much, but for the things that I do remember, I do remember being so young, so far as like 4 or 5. My younger brother, or my oldest brother, and I, there was an incident one time where, my bio mom and her boyfriend, I think she was like ironing his shirt, and then my brother, just being so young, he urinated on his shirt, and I just remember vividly him telling her to deal with it, or he was going to deal with it. So, and in doing so, she made the decision to burn my brother and I with an iron, and in doing so, she burned him on both of his buttocks, and so she burnt me on my left foot towards my ankle. And so how we came to be adopted, my grandmother and my uncle, they did like a welfare check on us, because in doing so they didn't hear from us for like a couple days, and so they thought to themselves like, that's a little strange, because we always hear from them. So that being said, they called Flint police, and they came to her location where we were, and they knocked down the door, then found my brother and I tied up and bound in the closet. And in that time frame, I believe it was like 3 days, because I remember us being like very malnourished, and we was in the hospital for at least like almost a week. But considering I guess the degree of the burn my brother dealt with, he stayed in the hospital like a little longer than I did. I think after I got out, he might have been there for like 3 more months. And in doing so, I know for a second she went on a run after that. They ended up catching up with her, and then she ended up doing, I think like 4 to 7 years in prison for that. And I believe it was in Michigan Departments of Corrections. My great-grandmother and my uncle, so they adopted us, and how we became adopted was, they went up to the prison, and this is everything my uncle is telling me, word for word. God rest his soul, but this is what he's telling me word for word. So they went up to the prison where she was serving her time, and they wanted to, not wanted to, they needed her to sign her rights over, for them to adopt us, because if she didn't, the state of Michigan was pretty much was going to put me and my brother in the foster system, and they were going to separate us. And so they didn't want that to happen. And so she ended up signing her rights over. And then from I want to say from the age of 7 and 8, everything went a little differently. And what I mean by a little differently is my grandmother ended up retiring from GM, and so her plan was to take us to Las Vegas. That's where she's retired to, and have been there for the last, I believe, 20, 25 years after she retired. And she originally wanted to take my brother and I, but her son, which is legally my older cousin, he said, "No, just leave him here with me, and I promise I'll turn him into honest men." And doing so, he did just that. He did just that. And so, being so young, not really realizing, the circumstances or the environment, I can honestly say, growing up, for sure, he did good by it. Well, no, he did excellent by us. He raised us to be honest men. He never treated us any different from his kids. Granted, he had 4 other kids, so he always treated us equally. When we needed to be corrected, he corrected us just like he would do his children. And yeah, I mean, I don't, this might sound, I guess cliche, or trying to find the word I'm looking for, but however, I don't regret any of my childhood, or I don't regret anything that happened to me. But I will say, from that pivotal moment from my bio mom to being adopted and initially living with my grandmother's son, I had a wonderful childhood. I grew up with wonderful siblings. Until this day, we still talk. Some are closer than most, but for the most part, I don't regret my life at all. I don't regret it. I don't regret not one bit of it. And I say that because I personally feel if I didn't go through those things, I don't know where I would be right now. I do know for sure though, and I can honestly say, if my brother and I did move out to Vegas with my grandmother, I think that would have been a world of trouble for both of us. And I say that to say, my cousins that are out there, a lot of them been back and forth to prison, just petty crimes. I know 2 of them are incarcerated now for grape, and so, and then I know one of them is fighting a murder charge just from being involved in different kind of gangs. So I like to think just my brother and I were pretty much spared and just given a second chance.
Well, you were blessed to grow up in a family, right? A loving family?
Yes, loving family, definitely.
You had 4 brothers and sisters? Or okay. So was that 2 and 2, or how was a blended family?
The blended family was great. It was definitely great. Every once in a while though, I did catch myself wondering, I wonder how it would feel Oh well, and then before I answer that, I should probably backtrack a little bit. So I do have a bio sister, and I have a bio brother as well. And they're also located in Vegas with my bio mom. And so, to answer your question, the blended family was great. And I did catch myself from time to time, always wondering and questioning, like, I wonder what life would be like if I grew up with my siblings, or, because there were pivotal moments to where, being in the blended family, you have these four siblings that are, blood brother and sister, and they have their mom and dad as well, so, and then it's just me and my brother. So of course, I had those pivotal moments and just got to just thinking, like, I wonder what life would be like if we had that opportunity to grow up with our bio brothers and sister and mom. But but instantly I will always like snap back into reality.
As you were thinking those thoughts about growing up with your bio mom, did it take you back to what happened before you went in with your uncle and aunt?
Yes. I could say almost every time, but no, it was like every time I thought about it, like, yeah, it took me right back to that pivotal moment. And in doing so, I actually got baptized on June 20th, and just learning and taking my walk with Christ. The biggest thing, is forgiveness. And so it took me, such a long time to forgive her. Even just to be on the phone with her. I was telling my wife the other day, before I got baptized, I would tell her, like, yeah, I vow to, if I ever have children, she will never meet them. She will never this and that. Only just because, that was my way of protecting my son or, my future daughter. But at the same time, it's like, I'm going to be there to protect them. So it's not necessarily like she done anything to them. That was just my subconscious of a way of thinking.
Yes, because we tend to remember the way things were and not take into account that people actually change.
Exactly.
Right? So I know, for example, when I met my son that I gave birth to in 1970, I still remembered him as a baby. I'd seen him as a baby, and when I met him, he was 47 years old, so he wasn't that baby anymore. And I never imagined that he would have been married 4 times and had 3 children and 7 great-grandchildren, grandchildren. You don't imagine that because your memory goes back to the time to what you remember. And your childhood was not the greatest. And in fact, generally I'm hearing stories from adoptees whose childhood is the reverse of yours, that when they're adopted, the adoptive parents are the ones that caused a lot of trauma for them. And how would you, I consider you to be blessed that you ended up going away from that trauma into a family that loved and supported you and gave you that unconditional love, and also were open about what your birth mom was doing, and that shaped your own identity. But these people that come into situations where it's like your original situation, how do you ask them to deal with it? What can you say to them to help them get through?
I'm sorry, could you say it or repeat the question for me?
All right, so looking at people that are out there, there are so many thousands who had trauma through their adoptive parents. similar to what you had with your bio mom. How would you suggest that they address that? Because they still carry issues from their adoption. They still carry that trauma.
Well, I would definitely say, for one, and I say Jesus Christ, for one, definitely for sure. I just feel like we live in a world now to where he doesn't get the recognition that he needs, or even deserve. But there are different outlets, so far as like, you could go to like a counselor, you could talk, I always tell people, it's always better out than in, because you could bottle that stuff up, and then you can keep it bottled, and then the way you feel, that can like transition on to the next person, just because you have whatever you have that's bottled up inside. And I just want people to understand and know that I understand that things are always easier said than done. I mean, I know there are some out there that, that can't talk about it. Some may feel embarrassed because they feel like, they probably could have controlled it, or, maybe they're embarrassed because they don't want to be judged. But it's important to voice your opinion and voice whatever has happened to you, because in doing so, you never know, you could always save another life, or you could end that cycle and begin to what am I trying to say? You could begin to start your healing journey. So I definitely would say, like, there's like counselors, and there's nothing wrong with going to see a counselor. That's another thing. I feel like we live in a world where, everyone is labeled. You go see a counselor, it has to be something wrong with you, and that's really usually not the case. I mean, it's just nice to talk to people, So, but they are there for a specific reason. And if you don't feel comfortable with a counselor, you could always talk to your pastor, or maybe you have like a favorite cousin, or like a favorite, old teacher or something, or like a best friend. I just feel like it's important to get that out of you, because like I said, it's always better out than in. Because you do more damage by holding it in.
I agree with you completely on that. I am actually an open book. Some people might say otherwise, but basically I am an open book. You never really knew your father, your biological father, and he died at 22. That's if I remember rightly. So how did reaching that same age affect you personally?
It's interesting you ask that, because I was thinking about that last night. And I remember this specific moment when I turned 22. I probably said to myself like 5 or 6 times, like, I'm just like, wow. Like, I really outlived, well, I'm going to outlive, my bio dad, because usually how it goes is, you wanna bury your parents, and not, the parents bury the kid. But in my case, I've never met my bio dad, but it was actually really, I guess in some sense, it was a little shocking. I had like all kinds of feelings and emotions that was kind of like hitting me all at one time. And just like I said, all I can remember is just saying, wow, I like outlived my bio dad. And You know, it wasn't till I'm 35 now, so it wasn't till I was 30 until I actually seen like a physical picture of him. You know, because I was always curious of what he looked like, and you know, obviously you want to know what he sound like or what he was about or whatever the case. But yeah, I didn't see like a physical picture of him like until I was 30, and so once
So do you see yourself in him, or do you see him in you?
huh?
Do you see yourself in him, or do you see him in you from the
Um,
picture?
no, I see him in me. So far as I guess looks, I definitely have like his nose and like his eye structure, and his build for sure. But I know for sure I have my mom's smile. So yeah, I see a lot of similarities, and just from the things that I was told about him, you know, it's kind of hard to tell just from a picture. I mean, and they say like a picture can like really tell a story, but just from looking at the picture, it was just kind of like, wow. So this is the guy that said, he jumped on, my grandmom, and he was like this drug addict and all these other things. So it was just kind of like it was a surreal moment when I turned 22, and it was like another surreal moment when I actually had a chance to like physically see him on the picture, of course. So
What would you like most people to understand about adoption through your experience?
and I'm glad you said through my experience, and the thing about it is, we all have our own paths that are laid before us. And just my experience, I'm just the all adoption isn't bad. All adoption is not bad. Obviously, of course, you hear horror stories and amongst other things, but and again, we live in a world to where you really rarely hear the good things. It's always the bad things we always hear. So, but no, I'm a living testimony, and I can say like being adopted, really saved my life. It was the best thing that happened to me, and just being so young and not even realizing that God had a plan for me from that, from being that young. So all adoption isn't bad at all.
So if someone listening is carrying pain from their past, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to let it out. Talk to somebody. Like seek help. And if they don't want to go that route by seeking help, and again, because they might feel embarrassed or felt like they were the victim and couldn't do anything about it. There's different kind of outlets. You could always write too. You can always keep journals. You can always like find different outlets. I mean, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be talking to somebody or writing or using a journal. You could probably put that all into music, or you could join like a fitness club. Just find something that is positive that can drive out that negative.
Yeah, because people have all these thoughts that are jumbled in their head, and they have to get them out in order to not be a victim of their past, right? So how has forgiveness given you closure?
Say it again.
How has forgiveness given you closure?
How have what? I'm sorry.
How has forgiveness given you closure?
Definitely. So I would say it's giving me closure just in the sense of like I'm I'm able to be at peace. You know, I'm able to like really talk to my bio mom because it was a pivotal moment. I probably went like maybe 20 years without actually like physically talking to her on the phone or even texting her on the phone. Like it used to be times where I just couldn't stand to see her name come across my screen, or you know, just having just hateful thoughts about her, you know, and not necessarily understanding, you know, maybe there's something she went through, you know, and you know, we all go through different things and you know, we all have different outcomes, but I will say forgiveness has brought me peace. You know, I don't have like this heavy burden I used to have, or like they say having like a gray cloud over you. You know, I don't. Oh, and matter of fact, I don't even wonder how life could have been anymore. You know, I don't even have those, you know, thoughts of things just swirling around in my head. Like I'm really free, you know, and it's a really good place to be. Like it's a great place to be, and in doing so, you know, it allowed me to, you know, reach different heights and allow other people in my life that brings me peace.
And there has to be some gratitude to your bio mom because without her you wouldn't be here.
Correct.
Right? Michael, thank you for sharing your heart and your story with us today. Your journey reminds us that even when beginnings are filled with the trauma, love and forgiveness can shape a new future. So that's the idea behind Roots and Branches. We're here to tell the stories. As Michael said, there's good stories and there's bad stories with regard to adoption. And here you have the chance to tell your story because there's someone else out there that is going through something similar to you. If Michael's story touched you, please subscribe, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And you can listen to all episodes at rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com. I'm Janet. Thank you for joining me in breaking the silence and stigma around adoption.
Thank you for tuning in to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, where every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Got an adoption story you want to tell? Want to learn more about adoption stories? Then visit rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com.